What's up, guys, and welcome back to Bass Fishing Tips. So the other day, my buddy Mr. Tyburger put out a video on his YouTube channel. If you've not checked it out, you definitely should. Really awesome information about bass fishing over there. But on his channel, he asked ChatGPT to tell him the top 10 questions that people ask about a certain bait category. Absolutely love the video idea, so I'm going to steal it. I'm going to tweak it slightly, and I'm going to do the top 5 myths about a certain bait category. And the bait that we're going to be talking about today is glide baits. And the reason we're starting with glide baits is because I think this is one of the most misunderstood baits in the bass fishing world. And the reason that I say that is for years and years and years, there was a lot of anglers out there that were fishing glide baits, and they were treating them as if though they were some sort of magic wand, and you had to be Dumbledore himself to actually wield it and to use it and to go out and to catch fish with it. And I think that that sort of attitude has really deterred people away from glide bait fishing just because of the challenge and the price point and the hunt that is glide bait fishing. But the reality of it is we're moving into a time with glide baits where they've never been more accessible, never been easier to fish, easier to get your hands on, and easier to catch a fish on. And so I want to dispel the top 5 myths that ChatGPT tells me that you guys think about glide baits and help you guys to feel more confident in the glide bait to go out and to catch a fish on this awesome tool that is just that. It's a tool for bass fishing. So without any further ado, let's get right into this video. Let's start with myth number 1, and that's you can only fish a glide bait in clear water. So this is a super interesting myth, and it is 100% a myth. Now, even though the fact that glide baits and clear water kind of go together like peanut butter and jelly, because a glide bait is a very visual bait. You know, it's a bait that you're going to interact with visually, the bass interact with visually. You're going to watch that bait, you're going to watch the bass, you're going to determine what the bass's mood is by how it reacts to the bait, and then make the bait do certain things to actually get the bass to bite it. It's a whole process to be learned, and a lot of that is very visual in super clear water. And the bait being what it is, a very big profile bait that does a really good job of trying to mimic very large forage in clear water. These baits do excel to a certain level. Now, that being said, I've actually caught more fish in off-color water rather than clear water on the glide bait, and I think there's 2 reasons for that. Number 1 reason being that I believe anytime a bass can see you, that whatever that bass was doing stops and is over. And so if that bass was following that glide bait, if it sees you, it's going to stop following that glide bait. It's not going to eat that glide bait. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that largemouth, smallmouth, and spotted bass, for the most part, in the world in which they live, they are the apex predator. They are the biggest, baddest thing in those waterways. And the only thing that is actually, after them and can kill them oftentimes comes from above. Things like eagles and ospreys and herrings and other large, mammals or birds that actually eat those fish from above, and they eat them from above. And so a fish has trained itself over the years instinctually to avoid anything that like hangs over them or looms over them that is not stationary. So obviously things like docks and, trees and things like that, they're always there. They never really move. And so a bass will really kind of just chill under there because there's no threat. But anything that's moving, like a bird or a person or a bear or an alligator or whatever it is, that bass is going to avoid that thing. And so I think oftentimes when we're in a little bit dirtier water, bass are a little bit more apt to eat the glide bait, follow the glide bait, and commit to the glide bait because they can't see us. And that fear of self-preservation and that instinct of self-preservation doesn't override the instinct to actually eat. The second reason that I think that bass will eat a glide bait in slightly off-color water a little bit better than they will in clear water is, they can't see it as well. This bait, as realistic as it tries to look, the reality of it is it's fake. Just the hooks hanging off the bottom, the tail doesn't move, the gills don't move, the eyes don't move, the body doesn't technically move how a fish moves. And so it's still a fake thing that we're trying to trick a bass into actually eating. And so when those bass are in slightly dirty water where they can't really make out that bait as well as they could in the super clear water, I think oftentimes they'll be more apt to eat it then as well. And an example that I give all the time is if you're standing out in a wide open, freshly mowed field with a guy in a gorilla suit, you're gonna be able to tell that that's a guy in a gorilla suit. You know, it's not that hard. He doesn't move the right way, doesn't make the right noises. It's just not a gorilla. But if that same guy goes walking through the woods, dodging in and out of trees in the middle of the forest, you're gonna think, oh my gosh, that's either a gorilla or Bigfoot. And so, you know, even us being complex beings, things that can rationalize, we often will mistake things if we can't see them clearly. And I think a bass being a way simpler being and that doesn't rationalize, when you make that water just a little bit dirtier, you're fishing this bait in just a little bit dirtier water, a little bit off color water, it can't make that thing out as much. And so it can get tricked into thinking it's the real thing and it's going to be more apt to commit to it. And so, yeah, I think the myth that glide baits are only for clear water is just that myth. You know, that's a myth. You know, we're going to hold on to that myth and say that that's not always the truth, that fishing a glide bait in a little bit off color water can be super advantageous for getting more bites and getting more fish to commit to the glide bait, turning those followers into ones that want to actually eat the bait. All right, so myth number 2 says that you need a giant rod, 30-pound line, and specialized equipment to throw the glide bait. So I would say that this is like a half myth, because half of the myth is actually truth. And that's the fact that there's a category of glide baits, your big depths 250s, your Clash 9s, those really, really big 2, 3, 4 ounce baits that you do have to have specialized equipment to throw them on. You know, just the sheer size of the bait and what the bait is made to do, you have to have big rod, big line, big reel, everything specialized for throwing glide baits to go out and effectively throw those baits. Now, on the other side of that, we have entered a time with glide baits where it's kind of the best time to fish glide baits because there's so many consumer grade, you know, price point, very fishable glide baits available. And this is one of my favorite. This is a KGB Chad Shad. This is a 7-inch total length bait. I think it weighs like 1.75 ounces. And this in particular bait, I'm throwing it on a 7.6 heavy casting rod, 7.6 heavy fast. So just a simple flipping stick. I got it paired with a 7 gear ratio reel and some 20-pound fluorocarbon. That's the setup. It's something that you can get at any tackle store. Go on omnia.com, walk into the Walmart. You can pick up everything that you need to effectively go out and throw this bait and to get bites on it. And so, you know, I think there's just an understanding of that there's levels to this. You know, on the lowest level, there's small little glide baits that you can throw on spinning rods, like the little 5-inch Nessie, all the way up to the highest level. There's the Depths 250 and heck, even bigger baits. Now I think Depths makes a bait that's like 5 ounces and 13 inches long or something like that. I mean, there's even bigger ones than that. And just understanding that somewhere in the middle, that kind of consumer grade glide bait, that made to be fish glide bait that go out and not only get big bites, but get a lot of bites of glide bait exist. And those baits you don't have to have specialized equipment for. And so the myth that you have to have that equipment is kind of a half truth. It really depends on the glide bait that you pick up. But if you are anything like me and you're just wanting to treat the glide bait like another tool in the toolbox, these mid-sized glide baits that you're able to throw on just normal casting gear are the ones that I would be looking at and the ones that I would be focusing on. And personally, I love these because not only are they bite getters, but they're big bite getters as well. So I can catch as many 2-pounders and 3-pounders as I can 6- and 7-pounders because it's still a big profile. It still displaces a ton of water. You still get that gliding, chopping action that we all love. But it's in a little bit smaller package that makes it just a little bit more available, not only for you to throw and for you to, be able to buy and go and get, but for the fish to be able to eat effectively and eat it in a way that doesn't require a ton of extra work to actually get that commit. So yeah, so it's myth number 2, I would say, is like a half myth. Like it's like a 50-50 there. There's a lot of nuance to that one. All right, myth number 3 is that glide baits only work in the pre-spawn. So that's really interesting. I would say that is 100% a myth, because some of the biggest fish and some of the best glide bait bites that I've got on have been in the post spawn. And if anything, to me, the post spawn is the time to pick up that glide bait, because oftentimes you're going to have a bunch of fish that just got done spawning. They're looking to feed up. They're willing to eat that bigger than average bait. You're going to have bluegill eaters. Eventually you'll have that gizzard shad spawn, which gizzard shad are bigger bait fish, and so you'll have fish that are focused in on bigger bait fish. And just generally, in my experience, that post spawn throughout the summer and then into the fall is when I get on my best glide bait bite. Now, that being said, it is not a myth that the pre-spawn is a really, really great time to throw a glide bait. And the reason for that being is pre-spawn is often the times that we're going to have the chance to catch the biggest bass that we will all year long. Not only do you have bass that are feeding up, getting ready to spawn, you've got bass that have egg weight on them, food weight on them, and so bass that could normally be, 5.5, 6 pounds could edge up into that 7 to 8 pound range, depending on all of those factors. And so you have a chance to catch really, really giant bass. It's just one of those things that what I've learned with big baits like the glide bait or something like, the coal shad in that pre-spawn time frame is that you're going to throw that bait knowing that you're only going to get 5 or 6 bites all day long, but all of those bites are going to be really, really big, really, really mature fish. Whereas when we get into the post spawn, you can pick up a glide bait with a heck of a lot more confidence and just go down a bank and get a bunch of bites, especially again when we're throwing those a little bit smaller profile glide baits, not your super giant glide baits. You can get a bunch of bites while also getting really, really big bites. And so, yeah, it's a myth that the big glide baits and swim baits only work in the pre-spawn. They work all year long, and really, truthfully, my favorite time to throw a glide bait is post-spawn into the fall. And really, the fall is like the pinnacle of glide bait fishing for me. It's when it's typically the best and when I typically get the most aggressive, just ridiculous bites on the glide bait. All right, so myth number 4 says that glide baits are only for big fish. Well, we've kind of alluded to this already throughout this video, and I think that, again, you're talking about kind of a 50-50 myth here. I think 50% of it says yes and 50% of it says no. The 50% that says yes, I believe, is when you truly get into giant hunting. Now, I still say that big glide baits catch small fish. The biggest bass that I've ever caught on my Depths 250 was like a 3.5 pounder. Legitimately, like, it's crazy to me that I never caught bigger fish on that bait than I did, but those smaller fish would absolutely blast that bait. And so you can catch small fish on giant baits, but I think that the mindset of throwing the big bait is kind of like big deer hunting, trophy deer hunting, true trophy deer hunting. Those guys that go out and they're looking for that 180, 190, 200 plus inch deer, those dudes go out with the sole intent knowing that they're going to pass on so many different bucks, so many giant deer of a lifetime bucks to go and truly get that like once in 100-year buck. And so there's an attitude about how they actually hunt and what they're doing. I think giant glide bait fishing is the same exact thing. I think when you get up into the Depths 250s, the Clash 9s, the even bigger baits than that, in your mind, you're setting out to accomplish one task, and that's to catch a trophy fish. Where on the other 50% of that, there's guys like me. And what I see a glide bait is a tool. And this is a tool for me to not only get big bites and to cull bites when I need them in a tournament, but it's a tool to go out and just catch fish on. And so I tend to fish a little bit smaller glide baits. Again, that 6 to 7 inch range, that 1.5 to 2 ounce glide bait, that easy to throw consumer grade glide bait, something I can throw on gear that I've already got in the boat. And I know that when I do that, I'll have a chance at potentially catching one of those trophy fish and one of those fish of a lifetime. But really, I'm looking to go out there and get as many bites as I possibly can. I'm more of the, what in the deer hunting terms, kind of go back to that analogy, I'm more of the meat hunter, and if I get a chance to kill a really, really big buck, of course I'm going to take it, but I also, won't pass up, or I won't pass up a 6 or an 8 pointer where somebody that's trophy hunting is going to pass up those 6, those 8s, those 10 pointers looking for that truly gigantic deer. I'm just on the other 50% of that. And the thing about it is that big glide bait fishing, that true trophy hunting attitude is awesome to me. I think that there's dudes who do that, And I literally have to commend them for doing it, because it takes an immense amount of patience and effort and time and skill to get those bigger than average fish to eat those big baits like that. And to me, that's just not what I enjoy. I enjoy getting bites. I enjoy covering water. And so I'm able to do that with a little bit smaller bait. And so the myth is glide baits only catch big fish, or they're only for big fish. It is a tool for catching big fish, but you will catch multiple different sizes from little 8 inchers all the way up to 10 pounders on a glide bait and do it effectively, especially when you start to focus on a little bit more consumable, consumer grade, smaller glide baits like my little KGB here. All right, on to the 5th and final myth. Myth number 5 says that it's all about the S-curve retrieve, or it's all about the slow, methodical glide bait fishing retrieve. All right, so again, this is an interesting one because it's not all about that. So I would definitely say that it's a myth that every glide bait has to be fished slow. It has to be fished methodically. You have to just really take your time and make that glide bait glide back and forth super slow. I actually hate glide bait fishing like that, and that's why I have this glide bait tied on right here, and why almost every one of the glide baits that I have in my boat are this style of glide bait. And so what this style of glide bait is known as is a chop glide. And what a chop glide is designed to do is to fish fast, to fish aggressively, to twitch it back and forth really hard, and to just really cover a lot of water, to make multiple presentations, and to get bass to react to that glide bait. So it's a category of glide baits within the term glide bait as a whole, whereas like your Depths 250 is more of that big, wide gliding bait, moving really slow, getting those fish to really make a mistake and trick them into eating that thing, thinking it's like a big trout or a big kokanee or something like that. And so that's a category of baits, and that sort of retrieve works, but it's not exclusively what the glide bait is. And so if you're intimidated by glide bait fishing because you've seen like the Butch Browns and other people like him that throw those giant glide baits, they're fishing really methodically, really slow, really taking their time around cover, that's not all that glide bait fishing is or can be. There's a category of baits like this one known as a chop glide that can be fished more aggressively and get those fish to react. And honestly, for me, and again, my style, going back to what I said earlier, I'm not the true trophy hunter. I'm the guy that wants to go get bites. I think that if you're the guy that wants to go get bites, if you're fishing ponds, creeks, and rivers, if you're fishing smaller bodies of water, looking to go get giant bites, that more aggressive style of glide bait is honestly for you over the big, slower moving glide baits, because getting those fish to react often is the #1 tool for getting those bass to bite. And I think that when we do talk about glide bait fishing and kind of go back to myth number 1, that glide baits are only for clear water, that even in those clear water situations, that fast darting action, that frantic, almost like bait fish fleeing action can be the action that you need to get bass to bite, not only in clear water, but off color water and dirty water. And I think that overall, the more aggressive glide bait is just better for the person looking to go fish a glide bait, to get a bite on a glide bait and to enjoy glide bait fishing. But yeah, that's the top 5 myths that ChatGPT says that everybody has about glide bait fishing. Let me know down in the comments whether you agree with these myths or not, or if there's a myth that you want answered, whether it be about glide baits or another bait category. It'll help me to make some more videos for you guys. And if you guys enjoyed this video, click this video, it's popping up right here.